everyone, Cam Roberts here. Welcome to the podcast show. Now, today's special guest is Brendan Kane. Now, Brendan Kane is an outside of the box thinker, speaker, author who empowers brands to scale by helping them stand out and beat competition in crowded and oversaturated markets. He's the author of the international best-selling book, 1 Million Followers, and the newly released Hook Point, How to Stand Out in a 3-Second World, as well as the founder and CEO of the Hook Point Agency. Brendan has worked with hundreds of individuals and brands, providing business and digital strategy for more than 15 years, including MTV, Taylor Swift, Rihanna, and many others. Brendan, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, Cam. It's a pleasure to connect with you and all the listeners out there.
Yeah, that's great. Hey, Brendan, that's a pretty impressive introduction. How did you get started in your industry?
Yeah, I initially went to film school because I wanted to produce movies, and I figured, with producing movies, it's the business side of the entertainment industry. So I really wanted to learn about business.
Right.
And as I started film school, I quickly realized they don't teach you anything about business there. So I figured really the best way to learn about business is to start your own. And at the time, and it still holds true today, the most cost-efficient way to do so is to start internet companies. So I started a few internet companies while I was going to college to really just learn and experiment and understand what does it take to build a business, manage and operate it. Right. And then when I moved to Los Angeles in 2005 to pursue a career in film, it's when the entertainment industry started to reawaken to digital after the dot-com bust. And like I talk about in my second book, is I'm a firm believer you need to be able to substantiate yourself in a unique way to stand out in very oversaturated markets. And moving to LA, it's one of the most oversaturated markets when it comes to entertainment in the world. I realized that there was tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of people moving there every year to become movie producers.
Right.
And working within a movie studio, I started like everybody else at the bottom, making coffee and copies and deliveries. And I knew just positioning myself as another wannabe producer was not going to cut it in terms of grabbing the attention of the head of the studio and high profile people in that industry. So I really just took a step back, and a lot of what I do is I intently listen. And, a lot of observing and listening to things that were going on in the office, I just realized that there was a lot of people asking, well, how do we use digital and social media as it was reemerging to promote our films? Because there's an interesting thing that happens that once a movie is done, there's a sense of anxiety that overcomes the studio and the executives that spend all this time and, more importantly, money to produce this thing, that now they have to get tens of millions, if not hundreds of millions of people globally to be aware of this thing in order for it to just even break even. So I just basically leveraged that knowledge that I gained in starting those internet companies to start helping the producers, screenwriters, producers, directors further syndicate the brand that they were building from scratch that needed to reach global audiences in a very short period of time, in addition to helping some of these individuals syndicate their own brand online. And then from there, I just realized through that process, it was a great learning experience, but it felt very corporate to me because people think it's such a sexy and creative thing to create a movie, but it's really another corporation. Yeah. And I just realized for myself is I'm really an entrepreneur. So that's where I left working in the studio system to start building technology platforms and licensing them back to big media companies. So working from the outside instead of inside. And that's where I built platforms for the likes of MTV, Viacom, Vice, Yahoo, Lionsgate, Paramount. And the MTV partnership really opened the doors to work with some of those big names that you mentioned, and just kept continuing on down that path of digital technology and exploring of all the possibilities that it could really afford brands and businesses at the highest level, or even people starting from scratch.
Okay. So how did the transition go from someone that was creating digital technology or technologies into your first book, 1 Million Followers, and then to your second book, Hook Point? How did that transition happen?
So initially, so after building those technology companies and licensing them to big media companies, I I got involved heavily in the paid media space because I was just doing some analysis and I saw that the biggest brands and corporations really rely on paid advertising to scale. And I got connected with a young startup of just like three guys sitting around a table that built a great piece of technology to optimize social media advertising spend. And when I first started with them, they were just, a few guys around the table managing about 300,000 a year, saw the potential in it, helped them craft a hook point to garner attention from the biggest brands in the world. And we quickly scaled it from managing 300,000 a year to up to 100 million a year and working with some of the biggest brands and corporations on the planet. However, it was a really fascinating experience because I saw behind the curtains of how these major brands really approach advertising.
Yeah.
And what they would do is they would spend hundreds of thousands, in some cases millions of dollars on a piece of creative, and then come to us and say, we want to spend X number of millions of dollars against this piece of creative, against a specific audience. Let's say it's females 35 to 50 years old. And when you would ask them, well, how do you know that this piece of creative is going to resonate with this audience to the tune of risking all this money, in some cases millions and millions of dollars? And 9 times out of 10, they didn't have the analytics or data to support the decision. It was really just a creative hunch. And sure, for a major corporation, you can make some of these bets and lose, but it's not a long-term strategy. On top of the fact, it's not a strategy for the rest of us because we don't have that type of money. So I left working on that company and started building my own set of testing methodologies on top of Facebook or Instagram, really to figure out how can we analyze and understand where to put our money, what type of creative to generate, what type of content, formats, themes, trends, structures are going to work for my clients that want to reach scale without having to spend a tremendous amount of money doing so until we know it works. So I spent a few years developing that, brought it back to some of these brands and corporations and was having success. And then I was tasked with a few celebrities and journalists and athletes of, well, can you help us grow a larger following? Not just, because most of these brands I was working with, are Fortune 100 and 500 companies. So their KPIs really at the end of the day are awareness, engagement, because it's not, most of them are not direct response advertisers. They're driving to a retail or an offline transaction. Same thing in the film industry. Most of the transaction of tickets, and now it's not really happening today because of COVID, were offline transactions. So it's really how do we reach the most amount of people in the most engaging and effective way possible. But when I was having these conversations with celebrities and journalists and athletes, it was, hey, our earning potential and our value is really predicated based upon the number of social followers we have next to our name. So can you leverage what you've done for these other big brands and the methodologies you've created to generate followers instead of engagement and awareness? So I'm very much an experiential learner. So I was like, I don't know. The only way I am going to know is by doing it. I had a hypothesis that I believed it would work, but I just said, let me test it. And I started seeing a lot of success there in generating followings around the world for my clients. And then it just seeded an idea in my head, because sometimes I would get posed the question, it's like, oh, it's great that you do this for a huge brand or corporation or celebrity, but I don't believe it's going to work for me or somebody starting from scratch. For some reason, they think it's a lot easier when it comes to that. And honestly, sometimes it's harder because you're dealing with such enormous scale. Like in the film industry, I can't walk into a meeting and talk about how an idea that's going to reach 10,000 or 100,000 people or even 1 million people, I'll get fired. Like I have to go much bigger. So in some cases, it's harder. But it's even an idea in my head is like, okay, let me prove that I can do this for somebody starting from scratch, somebody starting from zero. Because I knew I could do it because I spent 3.5 years building this. I had enough experience and data and testing to understand that it's not really celebrity that it drives it. It's really a strong hook point and a way to position unique content or unique value proposition to drive interest to click the follow button. So I really sat back and asked myself, not if I could do it, but why should I do it? And that comes down to a hook point. As I thought about publishing a book for many years, but I didn't feel like I had something that was really unique that would capture people's attention. And then the idea popped into my head of, well, what if I build 1 million followers, 100 countries in 30 days? And I called a literary agent that has represented over $5 billion worth of book sales. He brought the Four Dummies book series to fruition and represents Eckhart Tolle. And I just said, listen, I'm thinking about doing this. If I do this, will you sign me as a client and get me a publishing deal? And he said, yes. So once I had that answer, then I went off and did it, because I knew with a book, it served as a foundation to get on stage in front of thousands of people, to have a larger conversation, to really inspire people around the world, to get on podcasts, to get on television, radio, and print, and really kind of pursue my passion of really teaching people everything that I learned through my experiments. So that's how I initially came up with the concept of the 1 Million Followers book. And then after that, I got known for social media and like a social media guru or expert or whatever you want to call it, but it didn't sit right with me, because am I good at social media? Sure, but that's not what I'm really world class at. And that's where, listen, I've helped a lot of people with social media, but I felt like there's more value that I could deliver and really help people. And so I sat back and really analyzed the success that I've had over the course of my career, whether it was going from an assistant making coffee to creating the first digital division for a studio, or closing an MTV as a client, or Taylor Swift as a client, or helping this company grow from managing $300,000 to $100 million, and even generating the 1 million followers in 30 days. And when I actually sat back and looked at it and talked to some of my peers that are really successful, it really came down to really how to stand out in a very noisy world, how to craft your message in a unique way that gets people to stop and say, I want to learn more. Right. And that was the success that I had with 1 million followers. I didn't really know that it was called a hook point, or even starting off the film industry or working with a Taylor Swift. But that's what I came to the realization that that's what I'm really best at. That's where I can help the most amount of people, because I firmly believe that there's people all over the world that have the ability to transform it in a positive way. They just don't know how to get people to stop and pay attention to how brilliant they are, or how their product or service or message or coaching or whatever it can be can transform their lives. So that's where the concept for the Hook Point book came in, and it is really the core focus of everything that we do for our clients today.
Okay, great. So you gave some really good points there, but one of the things I want to bring up is you spoke about content and having the right hook point to get people to click through and take that next step. What are 3 big mistakes, I guess you could call it, that you see entrepreneurs, coaches, consultants, business leaders make with their content that does not create that hook point?
Great question. So there's a few elements. The first is they kind of try and skip the part of getting people to stop and pay attention and just go directly into the sale, right, or go directly into the core message. And one of the things that I teach people is there's a big difference between what people need and what people want. Yeah. And I think that oftentimes, especially coaches or entrepreneurs, they know that they have the solution for this person. They know they can solve all of their problems, but they're focusing on what people need, and they may not realize that they need it. They may want something else. So I'll give you an example. Is my book, 1 million followers in 30 days. I'm speaking to what people want. People want followers. So I hook them in with that to deliver what they actually need. Yeah. So that foundation of what they need is they need to have the right mindset. They really need to understand the dynamics of creating engaging and shareable content. They need to understand the elements of creating shareable content. Now, does that mean I'm misleading them? No, I talk a lot about those elements and how it fuels follower growth. And I give them a lot of tactics from myself and other partners I have on how to grow followers. But I understood fundamentally in creating my hook that I can't start with the successful mindset guide to social media, or the art of A/B testing on social media, because that's going to be way too narrow and most people won't stop. So just to recap, most people, they're focusing on, when delivering the message, that I know what you need as a consumer, so I'm going to lead with that, when people may not even be in that, state of mind yet.
Right.
Now, that doesn't mean you can't change that direction quickly, but you've got to focus on, what are they searching for?
Yeah.
What do they truly want, both consciously and subconsciously? And then once you have them hooked, then you can dive home, this is what you actually need to get to what you want, and I can help you with that. So that's one major issue that people run into.
So
the second,
can I jump in? Just a quick question on that particular one. Do you find that people rush into that process because they're so used to having that done to them, like through watching TV or listening to a radio ad? It's all about the sale. Like if you watch TV, they're trying to sell you a car. They're not trying to build a relationship with you, right? So do you think people take that, that direct response, paid advertising, and they make that mistake with their content?
That could come into play. I don't know exactly if that's the reason that they're causing it. I think that we've got to take a step back and look at the world that we live in today.
Yeah.
Is the world that we live in today, for better or for worse, there's over 60 billion messages sent on digital platforms. And we no longer live in a world where you're competing against your direct competition. You're competing against every piece of content posted every day.
That's right. Yes.
There was an amazing Forbes article that said the average person is exposed to between 4,000 and 10,000 ads a day. So what does that actually mean? That the average person is actually ignoring 4,000 to 10,000 ads a day. And when you open up Instagram or YouTube or Facebook, or even walking down the street or watching TV, you've got to realize you're competing against The Rock. You're competing against Netflix. You're competing against LeBron James. So that makes your job as a marketer, as a content creator, much more difficult if you're approaching it from the standpoint is sell, sell, sell. So I'm not saying that you can't sell, but what I'd rather do is start with, how do we get somebody to just stop and pay attention to you so that you can win the next part of the conversation and the next part of the conversation. I almost feel like it's a good way to think about it is you have to earn the right to sell something to somebody. And
right.
I was talking to a friend of mine who's featured in the Hook Point book. One of the most brilliant copywriters ever live, has sold over $1 billion worth of products on social media. And he was telling me about an interview that he was listening to from Bob Pittman, the founder of MTV. And I don't remember the exact wording, but it was something along the lines of, you cannot sell anybody anything. You can only solve somebody's pain point with your product or service. And I fundamentally believe that that's the reason I've had success, and my friends in inner circle that have generated remarkable results is, we don't go into a process of how do we sell this product. It's how do we provide value through this product or service? How do we solve a major pain point through this product or service? And it's a small distinction, but it makes all the difference in the world in terms of your ability to effectively get somebody to stop and your ability to connect.
Yeah.
And I'll give you another example that was featured in 1 Million Followers book. Is a friend of mine is a chief strategy officer for a company called Shareability, and they create viral content for the biggest brands in the world. And they were creating a campaign for Cricket Wireless with a wrestler named John Cena, who's also a movie star.
Yep.
And they did a few viral videos that was like John Cena reacts. So one of the videos was fans were sitting in front of a paper billboard of, wasn't a billboard, but just a paper thing of John Cena. And they were asked to express why they love John Cena. And then John Cena would break out and surprise them with that. And the video generated like 200 million views. It was wildly successful. But they didn't talk anything about Cricket Wireless. There was a Cricket Wireless logo and things on there, But what they did is they followed up and retargeted all of the people that watched and engaged with that video with John Cena saying, "Hey, thanks so much for checking out the video. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did enjoy it, please check out Cricket Wireless that made this possible. I think you're really going to love their products." So what did they do? They earned the right to have that more direct response type conversation. So they gave value, they gave entertainment, and then they went back and said, okay, now we want to, essentially check out this product or service because we're going to be valuable from a certain point, or valuable from these different perspectives.
Yeah. Okay, that's great. So you've also talked about like growing followers, and that was a great example of how to use remarketing or retargeting. Once you've built that value and built that trust. But if someone grows to 1 million followers, how do you convert those followers into customers and clients?
Well, first you have to ask yourself, where do you want to start? Because there's certain clients. Well, I don't even want to say certain. I would say a vast majority of clients come to me and they're like, I want to generate followers because I want to make money, and I need to make money right away. So to me, it's like, if you need to make money tomorrow or today, let's focus on followers second. Let's focus on creating some advertising campaigns.
Yeah, right.
And figure out how we can get people to perform the action that you want them to do. Because I want for my clients to have a sustainable model. And if you don't have revenue coming in to sustain the overall business and the efforts it takes to not just grow a following, but sustain that following, ultimately you're going to fail.
Yeah.
So let's focus on the real goal that you have first, which is, for some people, is revenue. I'm not going to say for all the people. Some people I work with are musicians or actors or something like that, that the number next to their name is going to correlate to revenue. For example, like me generating 1 million followers in 30 days, it was not about how do I generate 1 million followers and then turn those people into buying t-shirts or even buying books. It was, I'm going to use this as a hook to start a larger conversation, to get a publishing deal, to get on stages, to get on podcasts, television, and things like that. And I'm not saying that none of those 1 million followers I acquired didn't buy books or other things from me. It wasn't my core focus. I was thinking larger. I was thinking a longer term strategic play. Now, for some people, that's not the right decision because they need to figure out how to make money today.
That's right.
To keep a roof over the head or keep people employed. So in that instance, we focus on the same tactics that we use for follower growth, but to drive revenue, to drive leads, to drive conversions for the business. And then once we have revenue flowing, then we can go back and look at, okay, now how do we invest that profit into an infrastructure for follower growth, for organic content strategy?
Yeah. Okay, cool. And what trends are you seeing in the marketplace? In your industry, you're a leader in your industry and expertise. What do you see happening in the next 2, 3, 4, 5 years? Do you see it changing? Is it going to be more of the same? What are you predicting is going to change, if anything?
I believe it comes down to 2 fundamental keys to be successful today and in the future. And those 2 fundamental keys is, 1, can you grab attention? Can you get somebody to stop, even just for 3 to 5 seconds? And the second is, once you have their attention, what do you do with it? How long do you retain that attention? Because I'm not talking about clickbait here. Because clickbait is you get somebody's attention and then it falls apart because the message sucks or the story sucks. If you can fundamentally grab attention and retain that attention, you will win on any social platform and you will scale. And why do I say that? It's because there's one thing and one thing only that controls your ability to be successful in social media, and that's the algorithms. And the algorithms are designed to do one thing and one thing only, and that is to keep you on the platform longer.
Right,
yeah. I don't know if you saw the documentary Social Dilemma,
yeah.
But it's all about that. Is these platforms are designed to manipulate everything they possibly can to keep you on the platform longer.
Yeah.
So the minute you know that, the minute you know how to be successful on those platforms. Or if you're failing on these platforms, it's because you're not playing to those two contributing factors, which again is grabbing attention and maintaining it.
Yeah.
And that's going to be a through line no matter what platform comes next, or if the current platforms, which I believe is going to be the case, continue to grow and continue to be successful.
Yeah. And what's your thoughts on, the type of content? Is it a mix of video, the written word? Do you see a video getting more and more? The things like TikTok come along and, it changes the game again. What's your prediction there?
Well, I don't believe that TikTok's changed the game. I think they're doing the same thing as everybody else. It's
Right.
just kind of a different thing.
Yeah.
Fundamentally, you can find examples of people being successful in many different mediums. Obviously,
Yeah.
YouTube is only video. TikTok is only video. So in those cases, it is video. But you can see, like, for example, Brandon Stanton, who created Humans of New York. It was, a portrait plus a long text caption to contextualize a story. Or you see people on Medium that's doing only text posts, or Quora, or Facebook, you get a mix. So obviously, again, what you've got to think about is, what is the medium that I'm best at? What is the content format I'm best at that can achieve those two things, capturing attention and retaining it? If you can do those two things, it really doesn't matter the format. Now, again, you've got to look at it from the perspective YouTube is only video. So we're not talking about creating long form text articles on YouTube. But at a larger perspective, if you can master those two things, you're going to be successful no matter what format you choose.
Okay. And when someone wants to grow their followers, do you advise them to just do one platform at a time? Or is it, the advice is to go 2 or 3?
I focus on let's start with one first and master it. It doesn't mean that we can't look at syndicating that content out. So for example, Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, pretty similar algorithms. And like, if you can master Facebook, it can correlate to the other platforms, or, master Instagram, typically that performance will hold across those others. But even in that instance, we want to design it for one of those platforms and just focus on honing that in, because it's hard. Like, this is hard to master one. And like, if you're focusing on too many platforms at the same time, it makes it difficult to really master that. And typically what I see is, if you can just master one, like, this is going to be more than enough business for you. It's going to be more than enough to contribute to your success.
Yeah, that's really good. And what about repurposing content? Like, if you master Facebook, is it okay for a business leader or an entrepreneur to maybe repurpose one of their posts that did well on Facebook and make it shorter and put it on Instagram?
Yes, but again, you've got to understand that it may not work, and just really look at, again, when you're going from Facebook to Instagram, there's generally a cross-pollination with the algorithms and how they work. But at the same time, it's not guaranteed. The biggest thing is, for me, with anything, is, are you learning?
Yeah.
If you're going to take that piece of content from Facebook and post it on Instagram and it bombs, are you actually sitting there and analyzing, well, what was it that went wrong with that? Or if it succeeds and outperforms what it did on Facebook, why? There's just this amazing thing that happens with social media, is with the clients that I see, is they just keep posting and doing the same thing over and over again, and it's not working, and yet they don't change direction.
Yeah.
Or they just don't actually sit there and analyze, well, why isn't this working? Or maybe they have one that's an outlier and goes completely viral, but the rest of their content fails to get that traction. Is the biggest thing that is going to contribute to your success or lack thereof is, are you constantly learning with each post or with each piece of content that you're creating?
Yeah, that's really good. Now, Brendan, we're almost out of time, but before we wrap up, if those people that are listening onto this podcast or watching this video, if they want to reach out, they want to grab your book, where can they go? Where can they find you?
Yeah, I would recommend that, even if you want to focus on followers, start with the Hook Point book, and you can go to book.hookpoint.com, because it's really going to set you up for success. Because if I gave you 1 million followers tomorrow and you don't know how to gain attention, you're not going to get reach in the algorithms.
Yeah.
So that's where I recommend people start. If people want to dive into the 1 million followers book, they can go to book.1millionfollowers.com. If they want to engage with me directly, they can direct message me on Instagram at Brendan Kane or email me at bkane@brendanjkane.com.
Okay, great. I'll make sure I put all of those links in the show notes. So, Brendan, thank you very much for coming on the show.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.